Okay, we want to welcome anyone that might just be tuning in with us online, and we'll have a quick word of prayer for those that might tune in with us. Father, we thank you for bringing us together on your Sabbath day. Please bless this time as we study your word. Please open our understanding. Convict our hearts of anything in our lives that is not of you, and help us to glorify you in everything that we do. We thank you so much for the gift of Yeshua. In his name we pray, hallelujah. Today's message is entitled Affections and Lusts. We're going to start off in Galatians chapter 5 and verse 24. Galatians chapter 5 and verse 24 says, "And they that are Messiahs," those that belong to the Messiah, "have impaled the flesh," that means crucified the flesh, put the flesh to death, "with the affections and lusts." Now, this is not talking about the skin on our bodies. This flesh is this body that we're in that has an inclination to do the wrong thing, that has desires that are against Yahweh's commandments. Once we surrender and submit to the Messiah through the power of the Spirit, he empowers us to tell the flesh, to tell the body that we're in, no. And that evil desire that we're inclined to, we're empowered to put that to rest. But in a world that is surrounded with wickedness and sin and the lurings of evil and adult content, well, we shouldn't even say adult content, but unwholesome content. You can't even drive down the road with something on a billboard that is not appropriate to look at. So how can we put to death the flesh with affections and lusts when we're surrounded? And everywhere you look, everywhere you go, the world is just reaching out, trying to lure you away. Well, the answer is your love for Yahweh and for what has been done for you. Love him enough to protect what you're looking at. Love him enough to guard your mind. So we're going to do a word study on lust and discuss some things along the way. Let's go to Exodus chapter 15 and verse 9. This is after the crossing of the Red Sea. Moses, this is the song of Moses. And in verse 9 it says, "The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My lust shall be satisfied upon them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them." I actually didn't know this until I did this study, but this word lust right here is the same word in Genesis used for soul. It's H5315 in your Strong's Concordance. In most places, it's talking about a living creature, a living being, a breathing being. But here, and in a few other places, it's the reason it's translated as lust, but because of the context. And this is talking about Egypt pursuing after Israel and satisfying its soul, or satisfying its soul with lust. So that's why it's translated that way. There's a few other instances of that, but that's not going to be my focus word today. I just thought that was interesting. Let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 14 and verse 24. Deuteronomy 14 and verse 24, "And if the way be too long for thee, so that thou art not able to carry it," this is talking about taking the tithe of going to the feast and you have a tithe of corn, wine, oil, firstlings of your herds, your flocks, if it's too far to carry those things, if the place be too far from thee, which Yahweh thy Elohim shall choose to set his name there, when Yahweh thy Elohim hath blessed thee, then thou shalt turn it into money, and bind up the money in thine hand, and shalt go unto the place which Yahweh thy Elohim shall choose. And thou shalt bestow that money for whatsoever thy soul, that's the same word that was just translated as lust in the last verse that we looked at, whatsoever thy soul lusteth after. So here, lusteth after is translated as 183 in your Strong's Concordance. It's to wish, to desire, to covet, to lust. It's used 26 times in the Bible, 183. So whatsoever your soul or your being desires, whether it be oxen or sheep, wine, strong drink, whatsoever thy soul desires. So here's another word, 7592 in your Strong's Concordance, whatsoever thy soul desires. And thou shalt eat there before Yahweh thy Elohim, and thou shalt rejoice, thou and thine household. Let's look at Psalms 78, verse 16. Psalm 78 and verse 16. He brought streams also out of the rock, and caused waters to run down like rivers. And they sinned yet more against him by provoking the Most High in the wilderness. And they tempted El in their hearts by asking meat for their lust. And lust here is 53:15 in your Strong's Concordance. Let's go to Genesis chapter 3 and verse 1. Genesis chapter 3 and verse 1. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which Yahweh Elohim had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath Elohim said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And it's interesting that he actually did say you can eat of every tree in the garden, but there was a but after that. But of that tree, this one specific tree, you may not eat. That's in the previous chapter. Verse 2, And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim hath said, You shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. Now, we don't have any record of him saying don't touch it, but that might have been an added step of protection not to eat it. And the serpent said unto the woman, You shall not surely die. For Elohim does know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as mighty ones, knowing good and evil. So here, the enemy is actually saying that Yahweh's holding out on you, and that there's actually a reward in doing what he tells you not to do. And the woman saw the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired, to make one wise. She took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. Now, the first problem here was obviously doubting and not trusting in what Yahweh said, and listening to the enemy, which the enemy can come to you through other people. The enemy can come to you through advertisements. The enemy can come through your own thought life. And through the power of the Spirit, we have to tell the enemy in those thoughts and those doubts, no. But she looked upon what she knew she wasn't supposed to. She entertained those thoughts through her eyes. And then she had to plan. And she saw that it was pleasant and a tree to be desired. And we're going to focus in on that word desired there. It's 2530 in your Strong's Concordance, and it means to delight in, to covet after, to desire or lust for something that doesn't belong to you. We're going to revisit that word. And I want to just go over a story in the Bible. If anybody wants to go back and read it in your own time, it's in 2 Samuel chapters 11 and 12. And it says that David went up on the rooftop and he saw Bathsheba bathing. And it says that she was beautiful to look on, kind of like pleasant to the eyes that we just read about in Genesis. Now, at that point in time, David could have said, there's a woman that's beautiful and pleasant to the eyes right now. I need to go the other way and mind my own business. And David wouldn't have been in sin. Seeing her was not the sin, even though we don't know exactly what the situation was, and it is debated as to how much fault Bathsheba played in it. But if David just would have went about his own business and controlled his desires, it would not have led him to commit adultery. It would not have led him to kill Uriah, and also getting other men killed in the process of trying to kill Uriah. And when Nathan the prophet came along to confront him, he told him a story about a rich man that had plenty of lambs, but he stole a man's poor lamb. And that kind of calling Bathsheba a lamb kind of indicates that she might have been a little more innocent than what some people believe. So David's seeing Bathsheba, he could have turned away and mind his own business and went about his own business. And I just kind of want to tie that in here with this story in Genesis, when the tempter came and said all of these accusations where Yahweh was not being truthful and he's holding out on you. She could have trusted him. She could have saw that it was pleasant for food. She could have saw that, man, it looks really good. But she could have contained that desire and saved humanity from a lot of heartache. Let's look at Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20 and verse 17. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. This word covet here is the same exact word used in Genesis where it was a fruit to be desired. What it's saying here, another way you could word it is, don't desire your neighbor's house or his wife, manservant, maid. Don't desire it for yourself. Now, there's nothing wrong with desiring to have your own things, to aspire to have, things, but don't desire something that doesn't belong to you. And in the repetition of this, I'm not going to go there for the sake of time, but in Deuteronomy 5:21, it actually says, don't desire or covet. And the word 183 is used there. So just because you see your neighbor's wife doesn't mean you're automatically, there's an attraction there and you want it for yourself. And I've heard a lot of religious people that they're confused about the difference between looking and lusting, and somehow some people believe that it's the exact same thing, and that's not true. Just because you see something doesn't mean you want it for yourself. But if you see something, let's say out in the world you have people that dress provocatively, or they're trying to seduce someone of the opposite sex. Just because you see that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're in sin or that you fallen prey to it. But you do have the ability to turn away and focus your eyes. You do not have to feast on it, and you do not have to fall prey to what David did and start premeditating how you're going to acquire said sin. And it is definitely recommended to guard your eyes. But if you see something that's inappropriate, do not allow it to be a stumbling block, and don't start feasting on it, which can lead to premeditation of doing the wrong thing. So again, if you see your neighbor's house, manservant, maidservant, ox, donkey, etc., don't covet it or desire, which also coveting after things leads to stealing. If people wouldn't covet after other people's stuff, they wouldn't be led to steal it. Let's look at Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 20. My son, keep thy father's commandment, and forsake not the law of thy mother. Bind them continually upon thine heart, and tie them about thy neck. When thou goest, it shall lead thee. When thou sleepest, it shall keep thee. And when thou awakest, it shall talk with thee. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life, to keep thee from the evil woman, from the flattery of the tongue of a strange woman. That word strange actually means a stranger or a foreign or an alien. And what it seems to be conveying here is women outside of the land of Israel that don't follow Yahweh. The commandments are to protect you from, they were only supposed to marry inside of Israel because those of the nations would draw them into idolatry and sin. Lust not after her beauty. That word lust there is the same word used in the commandment, thou shalt not covet. Lust not after her beauty in thine heart, neither let her take thee with her eyelids. When I read that, I was thinking, wow, you know what? Everybody's trying to get their eyelids extended today. Hey, how you doing? Yeah? Don't let her take you. But see, the thing is when you know Yahweh and you walk in the Spirit, it doesn't matter how beautiful a woman is. Because if it's not beautiful in here, she's still ugly. And that's the problem today. Is people will seduce by the way they dress and by the way they walk and all that. And people can fall prey to falling in love with what's on the outside. And many marriages fail because they started on falling in love with what's on the outside. And eventually, guess what? The outside is going to fade away. And if the inside is ugly, your marriage is going to be miserable. So make sure you fall in love with what is on the inside, and you'll always be in love. And she'll always be beautiful. It's the inside that matters. And if somebody's trying to draw you in by what is on the outside, that's an indicator of what's going on the inside. And that goes for men and women. Men and women should be attracted to each other by their commitment to Yahweh and what's going on the inside and the heart. And it's a very dangerous thing to fall in love with the outside only. Let's look at Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 27. You have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. This word lusteth after is 1937 in your Strong's Concordance, and it literally means to set the heart upon. And it means to long for, to covet, to desire, to lust. And I'm going to show you a few examples of how else it's used to kind of bring it home as to what this means. But this doesn't mean to look at a woman. And again, I've heard religious people, they think just because you see it, you're obviously in sin, but that's not the case. This means when you look upon a woman, you set your heart on her and you desire her for yourself, and she doesn't belong to you. Or you're married and you're looking at something that you shouldn't be looking at, and you desire it. And this looking and desiring leads to premeditation, which leads to sin. We're going to touch on some verses about that a little later. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to preview just a few verses where this same word is used. The prodigal son, when he went off to waste his inheritance with riotous living, and he was with the pigs, it said he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the pigs ate. Would fain means desired. He was looking at what the pigs were eating, and he desired it for himself. Another place this is used when Yeshua is giving the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. It says that Lazarus desired the crumbs from the rich man's table. Also in Luke 22, where Yeshua said, with desire, I have desired to eat this Passover with you. So this is the type of desire it's talking about when you look upon a woman and lust after her in your heart. You are desiring her for yourself. This is the same principle that we find in the commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, house, etc. You do not want it for yourself. It doesn't belong to you. Do not entertain those thoughts. Let's look at Romans chapter 7 and verse 7. Romans chapter 7 and verse 7 says, what shall we say then? Is the law sin? Certainly not. Nay, I had not known sin but by the law. For I had not known lust except the law had said, thou shalt not covet. So he's telling us here that commandment that we read earlier that says, thou shalt not covet, that's how he knew what lust was. Now the Greek words here for lust and covet are similar. 1939 in your Strong's Concordance and 1937 in your Strong's Concordance. And one comes from the other. But they are just a little different. Let's look at Romans chapter 1 and verse 18. There's about, just for the sake of discussion, there's about 4 or 5 words in the New Testament that are translated and even used interchangeably. And this would be about a 3-part message if I actually took all those words and covered how they're used and where they're used. But I did just pick out a few places. And in Romans 1:18 says, for the wrath of Elohim is revealed from heaven against all wickedness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. So the context of what we're about to read is people who know the truth but still partake in unrighteousness and wickedness. Because that when that which may be known of Elohim is manifest in them, for Elohim hath showed it unto them. Yahweh has showed them of his existence. How? For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and majesty, so that they are without excuse. This is saying if you can see the creation, you have no excuse to not believe in a creator. Because that when they knew Elohim, they glorified him not as Elohim. So he's talking about a group of people here that knew Elohim, but they did not give him glory. Neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible Elohim into an image made like unto corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. This is talking about idolatry. It's saying this is where idolatry came from. People knowing that there was a creator, seeing the creation and having the proof of creation, but not giving him honor. So they fashioned things to bow down to. Images of man, birds, four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Wherefore Elohim also gave them up to uncleanness through the lusts of their own hearts. And that word is the same word used as I had not known lust, except the law had said, thou shalt not covet. To dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of Elohim into a lie, referring to idolatry, and worshipped and served the creature more than the creator. This word creature here is something that's created, meaning they worshipped and served that which they created, the image, more than the creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this cause, because they did this, Elohim gave them up to vile affections. That's the word right there that we started off in Galatians. Those that are in the Messiah have crucified the affections and lusts. For this cause Elohim gave them up to vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature, and likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the women, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves the recompense of their error, which was meat. And even as they did not like to retain Elohim in their knowledge, Elohim gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient. I thought it was interesting that these different wicked affections and evil lusts came from knowing there was a creator and not giving him honor, not giving him glory. Holding the truth, but living in wickedness. Let's look at Romans chapter 6 and verse 6. This is the solution. Actually, you know what? Let me back it up just a little bit for context. Let's start in verse 2. Romans chapter 6 and verse 2. Certainly not. How shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? And through the rest of this chapter, the context is something dying. Something has to die. And it's the same thing that was addressed in Galatians. The affections, the lusts, the desires of the flesh. And through the power of the Spirit, He gives us the ability, as we surrender to Him daily, as we stay plugged in to His presence through our fellowship, Bible study, congregation, staying in prayer, staying plugged into these things and protecting ourselves from the world, we can yield ourselves to Him, and it is easy. It becomes easy to just tell the flesh, no. Make your body obey you. And that's what the rest of this chapter is about. Being dead to sin. How shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? If you're dead to it, how are you going to continue to live in it? Know you not that so many of us as were baptized into Yeshua Messiah were baptized into his death? Therefore we are buried with him by baptism into death, that like as Messiah was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. For if we have been planted together in the likeness of his death, we shall be also in the likeness of his resurrection, knowing this, that our old man is impaled with him, that the body of sin might be destroyed, that henceforth we should not serve sin. If this has truly happened to us, if our old man is truly dead, we can tell the flesh no. We do not have to be in bondage to things that the world is putting out, things to cause us to break the commandments, things that would cause us to covet and lust after things. He wants us at a place in our walk where we're dead to that stuff. There's a verse in Galatians that says, I am crucified to the world and the world is crucified to me. Meaning all that stuff that the world is doing, it's dead to me. It has no power over me. But if you're still in bondage to the things that the world is throwing in your direction, you're not free. You may know the truth, but if you're still in bondage, you're not free. And that's why I read Romans chapter 2. They had the truth, but they didn't give him honor. And there's a penalty that comes with that. If you know there's a creator and you do not glorify him as the creator, be careful. He could turn you over to a reprobate mind. It's a dangerous thing to know the truth and not walk in it. It's a dangerous thing to know the gift of the Holy Spirit and to know about the world to come but live like a heathen. There's a verse in Peter that says you'd be better off not knowing the way of righteousness than to know it and turn from the commandments. Let's look at verse 12, same chapter, chapter 6, verse 12. Let not sin therefore reign in your mortal body. Do not let sin rule in this body, this flesh that you're walking around in, that you should obey it in the lust thereof. Neither yield ye your members as instruments of unrighteousness. Guess what? If there's somebody walking down the street that is not dressed appropriately, they're dressed provocatively and seductively, and you're lured away into that and you start feasting on it, guess what? You're yielding your instruments as instruments of unrighteousness. Now, seeing it is not necessarily where the sin lies. You can turn from seeing it. You can protect yourself. But if you continue to feast on it and you start premeditating the next step, you can lead yourself into a world of sin. And remember, beauty's on the inside. Let's look at Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 1. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 1. And you hath he quickened, that means made alive, who were dead in trespasses and sins, wherein in time past you walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now works in the children of disobedience, among whom also we all had our conversation in times past, in the lusts of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. Notice that it says you used to be. You used to have this behavior in lusts of the flesh and desires of the flesh and of the mind. And when you were doing that, you were a child of wrath. And then we read in Galatians that if you are the Messiah, you've crucified that flesh with its affections and lusts. So which side are we going to be on? Are we the Messiahs that has crucified those things, or are we children of wrath that's still doing those things? Corinthians says that we're new creations. Those that are in the Messiah, belong to the Messiah, are new creations. The old things have passed away. We're not living like that anymore. And all has become new. Let's look at James chapter 1 and verse 12. We're closing out here in just a minute. James chapter 1 and verse 12. Blessed is the man that endures temptation. Blessed is the man that is not lured into temptation. That was my own little side note there. Blessed is the man that endures temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which Yahweh hath promised to them that love him. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of Elohim. For Elohim cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lusts and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin. And sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Do not err, my beloved brethren. And I want to close out with something I read earlier. Someone asked a question. I was just reading some articles and things on this topic. And a woman asked a question, should I be ashamed of my body? Why is everybody always telling me to cover it up? And this is in an article. And I'm just going to read a partial response here. Covering something doesn't always mean being ashamed of it. Have you ever noticed how we treat the Torah scroll? We never leave it lying around open. It is hidden behind many layers. The Torah is kept inside a synagogue, in the ark, behind a curtain, wrapped in a mantle, held tightly, closed with a belt. It is taken out only when it is used for its holy purpose, to be read during the prayer service. For those special times, we carefully draw the curtain, open the doors of the ark, bring out the Torah, uncover it, and unwrap it. As soon as we have finished, we immediately wrap it up again and put it away. Why do we do all this? Why do we go to such trouble to conceal the Torah? Are we ashamed of it? Is there something to hide? Is there something ugly about the Torah? Of course not. The opposite is true. Because the Torah is our holiest object, because it is so sacred and special and precious, we never leave it exposed unnecessarily. We keep it under wraps because we don't want to treat it lightly. We don't want it to become too casual with it. Were the Torah to be always open and visible, it might become too familiar and its sanctity would be minimized. By keeping it away from sight and bringing it out only for the appropriate times, we maintain our reverence and respect for the Torah. The same is with our bodies. The body is the holy creation of Yahweh. It is the sacred house of the soul. The way we maintain our respect for the body is by keeping it covered. Not because it is shameful, because it is beautiful and precious. So, the world wants to advertise and seduce and even use the human body for advertisement, for gain, for making money. And they know that it works. That's why they do it. It lures in unsuspecting people, and but we're called to be holy. We're called to be different. And just because there are beautiful people in the world, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have our best interests at heart. I heard Charles Stanley say years ago that this world is full of women that are as beautiful as angels, but they have the hearts of Satan himself. Be on guard. Hallelujah.